Yeah, I wanted to talk about um, I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of the WWE. I did other promotions for you guys, AWA, NWA. And, I didn't do UWF when I talked about Watts and the racial controversy surrounding him. Um, and I did WCW and ECW, but I didn't talk about the WWE yet. And I said I was going to talk about every promotion, so here goes. Um, the WWE was established in as an independent territory in 1952 by Vince McMahon Sr. and Toots Mott. Now, there is a history that goes back further than that in New York with Toots and with Vince McMahon Sr. and his father, Jess McMahon. Jess was the son of an Irish immigrants. He and his brother started promoting athletics in the early teens. First black baseball teams like the New York Lincoln Giants, and after that, black boxers like the first black heavyweight champion ever, Jack Johnson, in 1919. Uh, since he was from New York and he grew up part of the time in Harlem, he saw that the demographics were switching at the time. That was the time of the great migration from the south of African Americans to the north, and he wanted to cater to that demographic of both baseball and boxing. Now, as far as professional wrestling, he um he got into that in 1925. Uh, Wrestling was really popular in the 20s, and it was controlled mostly by a group called the New York Syndicate. It was Ed the Strangler Lewis, the wrestler, Toussaint, and um, Billy Sandow. They were called the Gold Dust Trio. New York Syndicate / Gold Dust Trio. And they let him in on the action. After he established himself independently as a wrestling promoter out in Brooklyn, they let him in on the action after Ray Fabiani, another promoter, quit the group. In 1948, when the National Wrestling Alliance formed, Vince's group, then named Capital Wrestling Corporation, joined in 1952, and they remained a part of the National Wrestling Alliance until 1963. Now, what happened in 1963 was this: Buddy Rogers had won the World Heavyweight Championship in 1961 in a record crowd against Pat O'Connor in Comiskey Park in Chicago. And Buddy was drawing, pretty decent numbers all around the country, every single territory. But he was really drawing really well in the New York territory, the Northeast. So when the NWA promoters got together and they decided, look, they want to take the title off him and put it back on Luthez, the promoters in New York were like, nah, we don't want that. So they devised a fictional tournament in Rio de Janeiro to crown the new WWF Worldwide Wrestling Federation champion, and it was Buddy Rogers. Now, as soon as Buddy became champion, not so long after, he started not drawing. So they decided to call back a strong man from Toronto of Italian descent. They recognized that there was a lot of Italians in the territory, and this guy could draw tremendously with the Italian demographic. Just as he had done in Toronto, he could do the same thing in New York. So they call Bruno. Bruno comes into the Garden, beats Buddy Rogers with a backbreaker, and starts his 9-year run as champion. When Bruno was champion, they brought in George Animal Steel, they brought in Gorilla Monsoon, they brought in Don Leo Jonathan. They brought in Baron Mikel Cicluna. Whole bunch of different, even baby faces. He even faced off against baby faces like Pedro Morales and Bobo Brazil from the territory. They were popular in the territory at that time. Bill Watts was another one. Bill Watts in 1965 fought against, challenged Bruno for the title. In 1972, Ivan Koloff, to much people's surprise, beat Bruno for the title. That time was the 70s. We were deeply embroiled into the Cold War, so a Russian beating a World War II hero like Bruno was tremendous. Did tremendous business. But the real story was Bruno wanted out because he wanted the time off, and they wanted to build Pedro Morales because they thought they could have success with the Latino demographic like they had with the Italians. And they had success with the Latinos in the 50s when during the time when they were capital corporation days, when Argentina Rocca, an Argentine wrestler, an Argentine gymnast turned wrestler, was the main attraction in New York. So they wanted to do the same thing again with Pedro, and he beat Ivan Koloff, but it really didn't work out. So sooner than later, they were calling Bruno back, and Bruno defeated Stasiak in 1973 to become the champion again. This title reign lasted only 4 years as Superstar Billy Graham. Now, Superstar Billy Graham beat Bruno in '78, and that made history because WWE's since its inception, since 1952, was a babyface territory. It was built around a babyface, but Graham was a heel. But the plan that Vince Sr. had was he made a deal with Verne Gagne that he was gonna bring in one of the guys Gagne trained and make him the next face of the company. He just needed to build up the heel as a transitional champion. So he made, despite Graham being over with the fans and having tremendous matches with Dusty Rhodes, like the Bull Rope match in '78 in the Garden, Vince Sr. decided to make Bob Backlund the champion. Bob Backlund was the guy that Vince had promised Verne that he was going to put over. And Backlund came in from Minnesota, and he was WWF champion for 4 years until he was defeated by the Iron Sheik. And speaking of Minnesota, which was the territory that the Iron Sheik originally started at, also, they were going to bring in Minnesota's AWA's hottest star, Vince Jr. Now, Vince Sr. had handed over the territory in 1982 to his son, Vince McMahon Jr., and Vince McMahon Jr. had delusions of grandeur. In 1975, he had co-promoted the boxer versus wrestler match of Antonio Inoki and Muhammad Ali. Although it was a bust, it became world famous, because Ali's involvement in wrestling. But he wanted to take over all the territories. He wanted to make the WWF, which was renamed the WWF, he wanted to make it the biggest territory in the world. WWF had already done 3 closed circuit mega cards in 1973, 1975, and 1980, respectively. The 1981 was Bruno's retirement against student Larry Zbyszko in the cage. Co-main evented by Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant. So he wanted to do this again, and he started, buying out all these different territories, taking up all their top talent, and featuring on his show. The only territory he couldn't do that with was Jim Crockett Promotions, as I spoke about before, the whole Black Saturday situation. But he definitely bought out the AWA. He bought out Mean Gene Okerlund, Bobby the Brain Heenan, all these, Dr. D, David Schultz, and his plan was WrestleMania. WrestleMania he conceived to be the Super Bowl of wrestling with celebrities. You know, he took a gamble. They say he took a gamble on WrestleMania, and it paid off for Vince. And after WrestleMania, it was like a 9-year run with Hogan at the top. You know, creating pay-per-views, crafting the blueprint for modern professional wrestling up until 1993, the steroid scandal, Hogan leaving the WCW and going through those dark years of 1993 to 1996. And then after 96, you had Vince Russo, and Vince Russo helped to create the Attitude Era until he left in 1999. In 2000, WWE went public, and in 2001, they purchased their competition. And in 2002, they changed their name from World Wrestling Federation, something that a lot of Americans have come to grow and know, to the World Wrestling Entertainment. Last year, they launched their own internet-based network, and you know WWE is a growing company and is the mega leader in sports entertainment / wrestling.